Okay, so here's another type now of a relationship called commensalism. Co means together. I'm not really sure what the root words are in this, but one organism derives benefit and the other derives neither benefit or harm. Doesn't hurt it any, right? But whatever. And so here's an example. This shark here, this is a white-fin shark, probably a reef shark, and these are called pilot fish. They're called pilot fish because in the old, pilot is the guy that drives the boat or whatever. And the old sailors used to think that the pilot fish would lead the shark to prey. Yeah, no, it doesn't do that. But um, it would benefit both if it did. As it turns out, the pilot fish just hang around with the shark, and the shark, doesn't hurt the shark any, right? Might drive it crazy because the pilot fish is adapted to the shark can't catch it, and they know just how to swim to where the shark isn't going to be able to eat it. It might get frustrating for the shark, especially if you can't find any other food. It's like, stupid pilot fish, I wish I could eat you, but they can't catch him, right? The pilot fish then follow along, and when the shark takes a bite out of something like a tuna or something it catches, then there's little scraps, and the pilot fish will go out and eat the scraps, right? And so the pilot fish then is adapted to hang around with sharks, and it helps the pilot fish, but it doesn't really help the shark, but it doesn't really hurt the shark either. It's not really a parasite. Because it's not like the pilot fish is eating something that the shark, can't eat. So that's called commensalism. Another example would be like barnacles on a whale. It helps the barnacle. The barnacle has something to attach to, right? And they're little filter feeders. I don't know if you know anything about barnacles, but they got like these little calcite shells, and then they're like shrimp almost, the inside, and they have little legs that open up in the shell, and they filter feed like that. They're kind of cool looking when you're watching doing the feeding thing. They're actually related to shrimp. They're kind of an arthropod, which means jointed legs. Anyway, barnacles on a whale. It helps the barnacle. Doesn't really hurt the whale any. I don't know if it irritates them or itches or something, but as far as I know, it doesn't. Okay, now we get to the what I think is in some ways the most interesting. Things like predator-prey relationships are super, super, super important, right? And they shape a lot of nature. But sometimes, it's easy to get the image that it's sort of like survival of the fittest, that only the toughest and meanest survive. But sometimes things have a cooperative relationship. It's called mutualism, okay? Mutualism is when it benefits both. And I think that's important to keep in mind that nature isn't always cruel. Sometimes it can be pretty cruel. When a crocodile grabs hold of something, I mean, that is not a nice, good day for whatever crocodile's got in his mouth, right? But that isn't the only way living things interact. Living things also interact in ways that help both, okay? That's called mutualism, okay? It's a relationship which both species receive some benefit. Sometimes this is what people are referring to when they say symbiosis, a symbiotic relationship. And sometimes symbiosis just means anything living together, even a parasite could be symbiotic. It depends on how it's being used. So just be aware, like I said, it can be used more than one way. So, symbiosis. Okay, some relationships are so close that the individuals may not survive without the other, where they're living as a one, kind of a larger organism in a sense, like the lichen, which was an example in the book, I believe. One of the most important mutualistic relationships is pollination. Now, last year when we went to online learning, we studied bees. So, I know you know about pollination. Super, super, super important. Okay. This is one that pollination existed before there was such a thing as flowering plants. Like the cones would pollinate other cones, but it was mostly done by the wind, where they just released so much pollen that it was just bound to land on another cone and pollinate it, where you get the male and the female, the genes from the two different trees combining to, have produce a viable seed. Um, the flowering plants really developed during the age of the dinosaurs. All right, and this started coming up the grasses and the flowering plants that we now most of the plants the broadleaf plants are all flowering plants. Um, some relationships are so close individuals may not survive. Pollinators and the plants they pollinate have a mutualistic relationship where the plant could not reproduce without the pollinator, and the pollinator could not survive without the plant because it feeds off of it, whether either off of nectar, which is specially made sugary substance made by the plant for the pollinator to eat, or they eat the pollen. Is also very nutritious. And the pollen is the half the genetic material, and it pollinates the flower, right? So a transfer of pollen from a male part of a plant to the female part. Animals that carry pollen are pollinators. Wind can also transfer pollen. Like grasses are mostly wind pollinated, but bees, for example, couldn't survive without the plants they pollinate. And the plants they pollinate could not survive without the bees. It benefits both. It's like got to be one of the most important mutualistic relationships that have developed on planet Earth. Okay? So pollination is one of the most important mutualistic relationships. Here we have a moth pollinating a flower. Here's a butterfly. Many different types of organisms are pollinators, not just honeybees. Again, you learned about this last year, so this should be something you're quite familiar with. Also, here's an example of mutualism, okay? I'm going to move my image over here so you can read it. This is an interesting one here. It's a remarkable three-way mutualism appears to have evolved between an ant, a butterfly caterpillar, and an acacia. Acacia tree is a kind of tree in Africa. The caterpillars have nectar organs, which the ants drink from. So they're drinking from the organs of the caterpillar. And the acacia tolerates the feeding caterpillars. It doesn't really hurt them. And the ants appear to provide some protection for both plant and caterpillar. No other predators can get to the caterpillar because the ants will attack the predator. And it keeps other more drastic pests from infesting the acacia tree. The ants will kill it, right? So what we have here then is three different species interacting in a mutualistic way. So that's kind of a pretty cool example of mutualism. Now, there's something else I want to get into a little bit. That it isn't exactly one of the five as listed in the book, but it's really pretty important. It's competition. You might have species that don't like feed on each other or like a predator-prey relationship, but they might compete for the same resource. They might compete for the same food. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in here too. It's pretty important in general. Competition, it results from the use of the same limited resources by two or more species. And it's called an ecological niche. It's sort of what they eat and where they live kind of stuff. It's like a cubby hole is where the word comes from. It's a French word, means cubby hole, like in a bookcase or something, a niche. But now lions and hyenas are very, what's the word I'm looking for? Fierce competitors. Okay, both of them eat meat from the same prey. They're both territorial, and they live in the territories that overlap. And so there's constantly this strife between the lions and the hyenas. This is an eternal struggle. It's been going on for a long time. And the dynamics of the struggle are pretty interesting. A lion could just whoop a hyena's butt. But if you have a pack of hyenas, they would be able to take down a single lion. And so there's this constant competition and struggle to survive there.